Today I'm joined by Julie Eason. Julie is the managing director and founder of the Fundraisers and also the Art Fundraisers. So, hi Julie.
Hello, nice to meet you, Simon.
Likewise. Now, look, Julie, for anyone who doesn't know the fundraisers and the art fundraisers, how would you describe what you do, who you do it for, and also what makes you different?
Okay. So the fundraisers originally was the original business, and we raise money for artists, arts organisations, charities, local government, anybody that's got not-for-profit projects
Hmm.
historically. And then So that was historically what the fundraisers did. And then after COVID, our arts clients and our artists were having such a tough time and a different time to our charity clients who had all generally done really quite well in COVID, whereas the arts organisations and the artists had all really been hit a lot harder. Um, so we decided to set up the arts fundraisers because we'd been doing an enormous amount of work with the Arts Council, and it was a completely different kind of bid writing actually to most of the other bids that we wrote. And we didn't realize at the point that we did it, partly I did it for two reasons. One, because it gave us an opportunity to specialize in the arts, and we had been specializing in the arts for a very, very long time, but people didn't really know that. So it gave us an opportunity to have a new brand and to launch an arts focused brand. Also, it gave me an opportunity. I'd had someone come to work for me who was very good, Hannah Travers, and she's actually part of my succession planning and
Yeah.
will be and is leading the organisations into the future. And Hannah and I, between us, we'd had 26 clients that were all literally arts organisations about to go out of business if they didn't get lifeline funding from the Arts Council. And we managed to save them all. None of our clients went out of business. Everybody got the funding that they needed. And at that point, I wanted to make sure that I kept Hannah with me because she'd really stepped up to the challenge with me, and I could see how valuable she was. So setting up the arts fundraisers was also a way of cutting her in and giving her some equity, um, and making sure that she remained part of the business for the
So
future.
let's delve down into what that actually involves in. So as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong. If somebody wants some sort of funding,
Mhm.
you're aware of how what funds are out there that
Yeah.
charities that the arts can access,
Mhm.
um, and then you help people to apply for those funds, get access to those funds by whether that be bidding for them or whatever it may be. Is my understanding
That's right.
right
Yeah. So
there?
we write for most of our clients, not for everybody, but for
Okay.
most of our clients, we write their fundraising
Hmm.
applications, their grant applications.
Okay.
Um, and for some clients, we just review work that they've already done. Sometimes we train people to do it themselves. So, but essentially, and then we also work, so that's trust and foundation fundraising, which is grants usually to independent philanthropic foundations, but sometimes to government-backed projects as well, statutory funds, and sometimes international governments. And then we also do corporate fundraising, which is working with partnerships between charities or arts organisations and businesses, and individual giving, which is regular gifts of 10, 15, £20 a month. And we also do some major donor fundraising, which is larger gifts from usually relatively high net worth individuals. Um, and it depends on the cause. So some organisations we know really aren't popular with trust fundraising. There might be one of them in every town, and so if, for example, you're in a local information and advice agency, actually, there's a lot of those. There's usually two or three advice agencies in each town in the UK. So if you're a funder, you can imagine you're getting a lot of very similar requests for very similar type of service. And actually, that's often not sexy. So some organisations would say, actually, this type of fundraising really doesn't work for you. We suggest you do this instead. Um, but most people start with grant fundraising and then build out from there.
So
That's typically
what
how it
originally
works.
drew you into fundraising and then eventually starting your own consultancy in relation to fundraising?
So I mean, I'd had quite an interesting career. I'd started in the voluntary sector. I started in student politics and then went from there into working for a charity in London. Then somebody came along and said, "Oh, you should go and be in the civil service fast stream. That's what you should be doing." I didn't even know what that was, so I applied for that and got in. And within 9 months, I was running the permanent secretary's office and the cabinet office, and that was all a bit terrifying. And then I went, did that for a number of years, and then I went to Australia and I was running I was the director of housing and social policy for the planning department and doing the whole of the strategy for Sydney, and that was all really exciting, but also terrifying. I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing at all. But luckily I found lots of people who really did know what they were doing and brought them around and worked with them. Um, and then I came back to the UK and I went back to the UK civil service. And when I uh, had my son and I was by myself, I thought, you know what, actually, I don't want to be commuting to London. So then I started working. I'd always been a fundraiser, really, from school. So I'd been doing it all my life. And I'd always, whatever job I was doing, I'd always been involved with a couple of charities and writing trust and foundation bids. Because there's lots of things that I think could be better in the world. And if you have a opportunity to change it and you know how to change it, then why wouldn't you? But I hadn't really thought about it as a career until I ended up running a partnership of the advice agencies in Sussex, and I just was good at it. So if you're good at something, people tend to ask you to do it quite a lot. And then from there, I went and did a couple of director of fundraising jobs, and then I think, like lots of people, that I ended up in consulting sort of by accident. I was in a role that I wasn't enjoying, and I just jumped, and I didn't really have a plan. And my plan was just to do it a bit by myself. And that for the first 5 years, that's what I did. It just was me writing bids, and that was all fine. And then I had a major health incident and ended up having brain surgery and had to come back to work immediately after it because I was a single parent and I had a mortgage to pay. And at that point, I thought, I don't ever want to have to do this again. So then I started recruiting a team so that in the event that I had a major health incident, I could actually be off work and still get paid. Um,
There's some interesting things that you mentioned there in talking through that career that you've just sort of said. And the first thing that stood out to me, and actually this all links into sort of team and that sort of thing, is the first thing you said to me is when you were in Sydney, you were you were unsure what you were doing, but you surrounded yourself by good people that did know what they were doing. And
mhm.
then when you led on to your what happened, your illness, etc., and then came back to work again, you realised actually I need to surround myself from good people with good people so that this
Yeah.
business doesn't just rely on me. So that I guess that really highlights the importance of having a team and the right people around you.
Yeah, I mean, I think recruitment, any CEO, I would expect to tell you that recruitment is key and getting the right people is key, and keeping and motivating those people is really important.
Yeah.
And that all starts with the leadership and the culture that you set and the way that you look after your team, I think. Um,
So
but
let's look at that. So you mentioned there culture,
mhm.
leadership, and I think you mentioned environment as well, did you there as well?
Yeah, I think just the way you look after them, really.
The look after. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah,
So for me, I think because I needed a team rather than had like so my motivation for needing a team came out of just wanting to be able to be sick sometimes if I
yeah.
needed to be. Um, and so rather than a real sort of desire at that point to really grow the business, and so actually, because of the way that, because of my reasons, I actually set the business up in a way that it would work for people, whatever was going on in their life. So
Okay.
one of the things that we've always said to our team is you can pick your hours and you can vary your hours and you can work your hours outside of what you agree with the clients. If you say you're going to be at a meeting at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, be at that meeting at 3 o'clock on Tuesday. But outside of that, if you want to be working at 2 o'clock in the morning because that's when the kids are in bed and it's really quiet and your brain works best, that's fine, so long as the
Mm.
work's good.
Yeah.
And so that kind of culture of allowing the team to make the job work with their life, I think, always made it easy for us to recruit good people and also made it really easier for us to keep good people.
Yeah.
But what we also found when we did a survey last year is that actually about 80% of our team have either got some kind of long-term condition or neurodiversity or something going on in their lives that makes that flexibility super important to them.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and we didn't really realise that actually. We didn't until we asked the questions, we didn't really even know that because everybody just had been managing that. And so I think we recruit in fundraising, looking for good fundraisers is, they're very few and far between. And our recruitment, the way that we recruited allowed us to recruit people all over the world. So we have, brilliant fundraisers that end up in Guatemala and suddenly are doing PA work because that's the only work available in Guatemala. But actually, if they can be working for us, that's, brilliant money and a chance to keep their in with their profession. So we have a lot of people that are working from overseas and a lot of people that are working from quite remote areas, and that's all
But
fine.
as the fundraisers has grown,
Hmm.
you mentioned there about, started out on your own, started to recruit a team. So
Hmm.
over the years, it's grown.
Hmm.
What's been the biggest challenge in scaling the business without compromising on the quality of service that you offer?
Well, that is the biggest challenge. How do you scale and keep the quality
Yeah.
is, I think, the challenge. And for us, we've very much bucked all the business management school trends. So we don't have a sausage machine of you do A and then we move you on to B and then we upsell you on to C, D, and E. We don't work like that with our clients. We say, we'll come in, we'll really look at and understand where you're raising money from, how much you need, and who is likely to give it to you that's currently not giving it to you.
Mm,
And then we will give you our best advice. But if you want to do something different, you get to steer it as the client.
mm.
And it's based genuinely around what the clients need. And so for us, I think the thing I was very lucky very early in my business in that I had a friend working in publishing, and I'm not going to tell you the country she was in because it would potentially identify who they are, but one of three publishing houses in the country she was in, two of which are very, very well known, massive high street brands, and the other one of whom was a family business, which my friend was involved with. And they were struggling. They were losing out to the big boys in terms of authors, in terms of getting the books, making the books, and putting the books out that they wanted to put out. And she went with a really simple strategy, which said, let's just do everything with real integrity. Let's really look after our authors. Let's make sure that the quality of the paper that we use means they pick the book up and they go, oh, that feels beautiful. Let's make sure that the photography that we use is really top notch. Let's make sure that the design that we use is really top notch, that we really give them a detailed, focused around their book marketing strategy that is bespoke to them. And let's just work on the basis of doing everything really very well. Anyway, this particular company have gone from struggling to winning enormous number of national awards and really cleaning up in terms of the market that they're in and being known as the best in the country that they're in now. And that philosophy really impacted on me I think we are taught, particularly if you watch things like The Apprentice, we're taught, as business leaders, our role is to squeeze people as much as possible, sell as hard as possible, get the maximum margin possible at all points, and it's all about the bottom line. And actually learning and seeing somebody who really transformed a business but did it with real integrity made me realize that that was possible. And
Love
so
that.
that's our philosophy. So for example, at the moment, we're using AI. Everybody's using AI, but we're using it with one client. We're testing it with one client. We're in a very open way in which they know everything we're doing. We are seeing the results. They're seeing the results. and we found that we can bring in significant amounts of money with AI written bids with proper feeding of proper decent information in the first place. So you need good bid writers to start with, but once you've got a series of good bids that you can feed it and a series of really credible information about the client, then you can get great stuff out. But actually that we're only doing it with one client, and we know that it's got massive potential across our client base, but we're testing it and getting it and making sure we absolutely understand it perfectly, and then we will talk to our clients and they can opt in or opt out
Yeah.
of that form of working.
Yeah, look, that makes sense. I think working out, I think that's let's again, let's just highlight a couple of things that you mentioned there in growing a business with integrity. I think that's a great share. Doing the right things, and as you say, not squeezing every last sort of bit out of the lemon. But then, yeah, mentioning about, yeah, look, embracing AI, but thinking carefully about how you do it, how you use it, using it openly and honestly, and those sort of things. So, because it is a great tool, but it has to be used correctly. So, look, two great shares there. Thank you for that. And what would you say is the biggest challenge that the business is facing right now?
I think the biggest challenge always actually for small businesses, if you're fast growing, is cash flow.
Yeah.
And we've made some really, I don't know if they're sensible decisions, but we decided that we weren't going to take investment into the business. And we've kept our borrowing very limited. And have really, so we have really had to manage within our cash flow. And that's been difficult at times. But I think because of the way that we work, we've kind of, because of our model of integrity, we have really strong and honest and really excellent relationships with all of our clients, and all of the management team really are very, very well. All of the consultants actually are really well respected by the clients we work with, and we very rarely have any problems. And none of our clients ever leave us, or very, very rarely. We have like over 99% attrition year on year, and also our clients have grown our business for us. So we do almost no marketing, and we've doubled in size 7 times with almost no marketing, and that's purely on the back of our clients going around and saying to other people, you want to work with these guys, they're brilliant. Um,
Look, I'm
so
interested to touch on one thing that you mentioned earlier, actually, before we came on to live onto this, is about you now stepping away from the business.
mhm.
You've got the business to a point where you've got a great team in place, you've got a great management team in place, and you've now stepped back and are now letting them take that business forward, to the next level and into the future. Um, what what made you decide that now was the right time to do that?
A number of things really. So firstly, I think I for the first time I really felt that I totally had the team that we needed.
Mm.
And so that made it easier. But also the business, I'm a bit of an idealist, I think, and I remember learning at about 15 years old about the Industrial Revolution and learning about Joseph Rowntree and the various people that set up cooperatives. And I knew when I set up a business that if I set up a business that at the end of my period of involvement with that business, I'd want the team to own the business. So my strategy in terms of exiting is that the business will buy me out over a fairly long period. And as it does, those shares will go and sit. Some of the shares are already owned by members of the team, and they will also sell, and those shares will sit in a holding company, and the profits from that will be shared amongst the team. And long term, the team will end up being entirely, receiving all the profits of the business. So given that that's happening, actually, there was a couple of reasons why that was my exit strategy. One, because ideologically, that's always how I'd kind of envisaged any business I set up would go. And secondly, because really, if you look at all the research and the stats, actually, management run businesses, management buyouts are quite successful, and the business is likely to exist for quite a long time after the founder leaves with the management buyout. But the most successful way is if the team all own the business. And those businesses last the longest in the future. And in my work, the work that we're doing makes a real difference, like whether it's doing up a town hall or getting an art gallery restored or extended, having a new building, a children's home or a home for disabled people to have holidays in, or putting sculptures on beaches, or delivering, programs that support kids in care, or like there's so many amazing ways in which as a fundraiser you can change the world. So for me, the longer that the businesses can continue to do that, and the longer they can be bringing in money to make the world a little bit better, um, the better, really. So actually, that strategy for me just made sense.
Yeah,
And so stepping
sorry,
back is part of that, and sharing power. Actually, I feel like I've been sharing power very generously with my team over quite a long period of time. And as a leader, I think one of the things that we have to, particularly as founders, the thing that we have to really get our head around is letting go and trusting other people to be able to do things, maybe not exactly as you do it, but to be able to do them really well. And recruiting people that can do things really well and then giving them the freedom to do it.
and that's the thing that really actually stood out to me when you were saying that, is that you always had a clear vision of this is how I want to exit this business. Which, by
Mhm.
the way, I think is great, because the bottom line is we're all going to exit our businesses at some stage in some
Mhm.
way, shape, or form. But you had a clear vision of this is how I want to do it. So over time, you put the things in place that needed to happen. You surrounding yourself by a great team, employing the right people, starting to hand over power to them, and ownership and accountability, and all of those sort of things that then has now got you to the point that you've gone, actually, yeah, I can now step away knowing that I've got the right people leading this business going forward. And um, continuing, like, what also came through there was what's really important to you, Julie, is the sustainability of the business going forward, because it does such important work for a lot of people, that actually you wanted to make sure that this business carried on. It was your, well, to use a better phrase, it was your legacy, that carries on into the future. So they're the
Yeah,
things that
if
stood out
it's
to me from.
assuming it, because the other thing to say is what's happened in the interim, the other thing that makes our business really special is that our success rates are off the charts compared to almost everybody else. So there are some funders. So, for example, the Arts Council, their average success rate is probably about 12%. 90% of our bids get funded by the Arts
Wow.
Council.
Yeah.
For the Heritage Fund, which is any heritage projects, buildings, a lot of capital money, we have a 100% success rate going back to 2011, and almost the same for Garfield Weston, who's another massive funder. So we've only lost one bid ever since 2011, and we probably do 5, 6, 7, 8 a month of those. So I want the business to continue as long as those success rates mean that people that come to us are way more likely to get the money than if they wrote the bids themselves, and significantly more likely to get the money than if they went to most other consultancies.
Yeah, I
So
like
as
that.
long as we can sustain that, then it's worth the business sustaining. If the business got to a point where our success rates, if we were getting 12% of the Arts Council bids and the Arts Council were giving away 12 money to 12% of applicants, and working with us made no difference, at that point I would be less bothered about the legacy.
But also, the business probably wouldn't exist there anyway, because people wouldn't come to you
People
because
would have
the
gone.
success
Yeah,
rate weren't
and then
good
we
enough.
wouldn't
So,
be saying that
so
our
it's a sort
clients
of
never leave
circular
us
thing
and
there,
all of
isn't
that.
it?
Yeah.
So, look, there's one question that I always like to ask everybody that's kind enough to join me for this discussion, Julie, and that is, what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you?
I think I'd say so. The 18-year-old me was quite anxious, and actually, I think a lot of us suffer with imposter syndrome throughout our careers, and I'm not necessarily that much less anxious in my 50s, but I certainly I think what I'd say to the 18-year-old is just keep doing what you're doing. Seriously, try and follow your dreams because more often than not, they'll come true if you put enough effort into it. Um, and yeah, and don't worry, it'll all be all right. I might also say if you decide to set up a business, don't just jump, plan it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Look, all great shares there. I like that. Keep doing what you're doing. Follow your dreams. Plan. Like if you decide to start a business, plan it. Great shares. So look, Julie, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your businesses, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon. It's been a real pleasure.